Hello, everybody. I need to get used to that microphone a bit. Almost possible to do it without a microphone, I think. Or is it? Are you recording? Okay. All right. If you do live streaming, then I will stick to the program. Yeah, thank you very much for attending the session. I see there are multiple sessions, so I will try to entertain you for the next 20 minutes. Before I start introducing myself a little bit more, I wanted to actually state one interesting fact I just read recently. Did you know that sustainability has about 300 different definitions according to academic literature? So it's not an easy subject to address, and I'm sure in all your companies you also might have a different definition than what we have at Solvay. So to bring this topic a bit closer to you, I will basically cover a couple of areas today. So one is how do we at Solvay describe sustainability, how do we tackle it, and how do we make it really our strategic program. The second one is, and that's a really interesting new domain for me and but also for the company, is how do you actually connect the dots between sustainability and customer experience. And last but not least, looking at the topic also of this conference, talking about digital transformation, how do we use digital means to actually drive our sustainability goals? So a little bit about myself. So I'm heading the digital customer journey at Solvay. Solvay is a chemical company, or as we call it also a science company, with a focus on producing sustainable materials and chemicals for all parts in our daily lives, a large B2B company. And I just started there actually a year and a half ago. And I'm looking after all the digital engagement opportunities that we have with our clients. And maybe a little fun fact, I grew up actually in East Germany, and I have like two very fond memories still, one less fond, one more fond, when I grew up, which also led me a bit to the topic of sustainability and customer experience. One, and that's the picture on the left-hand side, is the shop of my grandparents that had a small dairy shop in Wittenberge, which is in the north of Germany, northeast of Germany, which was interesting to grow up with grandparents that run a shop, A, because there were not a lot of shop owners back in the GDR, and secondly, the interaction with customers. So that was a really interesting one because I could not walk with my grandparents through the town without stopping every single minute, because they knew everybody, they talked to everybody, and it was just a real nightmare as a child to go from A to B. But it also told me something about them knowing the audience really, really well, and you could see that in the shop. The second part, the second memory is, I think a lot of you recognize this very iconic masterpiece of engineering, the Trabant. The one thing that I do remember from it very well is it made a lot of noise and it made a lot of smelly air. And that's another part which probably led me also in the back of my mind to focusing on sustainability in the future, because I think it's an important aspect of our daily lives to be able to breathe nice air. And the last part, and that's I will skip that one, but the last part is me standing in a lab in one of our laboratories in the agriculturing sector, where we basically look at a lot of data on how to use formulations in the agriculturing sector to utilize and to also fast forward prototyping with our basically researchers and look at what type of sustainable products we can develop in the agriculturing domain. So that's a little bit about myself. And now a bit more about Solvay. So I already mentioned Solvay is a science company. We talk science company because we look at reinventing progress as our core ambition as a company. It was founded 160 years ago by Ernest Solvay. And interesting fun fact again, Solvay was the first and the biggest multinational company before the First World War. So has a long history, a big family background, and the family is still very strong in this company until today. So quite big. We have a presence in more than 60 countries. And one interesting fact already is that we have around 50%, a bit more than that, already sales from sustainable solutions. So it's really something that is very dear to us and very close to our hearts to bring sustainability to our customers and to our entire ecosystem. So as one example that I wanted to give you also in terms of innovation, some of you might remember it was in 2015-16, the first world solar flight that was conducted then, and a lot of the material that was used for that solar airplane actually came from Solvay engineering. So the battery and also the lightweight of the airplane was all supplied by researchers within Solvay. And you can imagine the development of that takes crazy amount of time. So sometimes we also have lead times with our customers that are, let's say, from between 1 year to 10 years, because there's a lot of research and development going on. And that's maybe a nice segue into the topic of sustainability. As you know, it's a big topic everywhere. You see climate activists on a daily basis in the news. We heard a lot about global warming, and there's also, let's say, a sad truth, which is that industry in itself comprises around 1/4 of all energy-related CO2 emissions, which is a big element that we need to address. I also have the nice, let me see if I can find it here. That's one too far. A nice graph, and some of you might have seen that already. So I just need to find the gentleman now to help me with showing the video. Just switch it around. A short breather. So it's just it's an interesting graph that I found recently, which basically shows the development over the last 140 years in terms of the increase of our temperature of our Earth. And what's interesting in that context is that you would think, okay, 1 degree change or 1.5 degree change, what's the big deal? But I saw a really interesting analogy the other day where somebody described it in comparison to a fever. Basically means like temperature goes up and down. We could think like, it's not too big of a deal, but think about it as in a fever. If your average temperature over a long time is above your 37 degrees, you don't feel great, you feel weak, you have probably all kinds of issues. And that's a bit what happens actually with the Earth as well, that reaching that certain level of average degree that's above the normal temperature levels will definitely cause a lot of devastating effects over time with a lot of impact on our society. So that was just a quick intro to that. And what does it actually take to actually move into the right direction and stop that insane progress that we are seeing, and stop that insane video that we are seeing? It takes big, hairy, audacious goals. Right? So that's the one thing that we really need to take into consideration. How do we actually tackle that? And industry, seeing that it has such a massive impact, really needs to take it by the horns. And therefore, at Solvay, we have a very holistic approach towards sustainability. We define it by 3 key dimensions: the climate, resources, and better life, and really look at the entire value chain. And we have a couple of key goals there. The first ones are very obvious ones. Okay, how do you reduce actually the greenhouse emissions, phasing out of coal? How do you actually look at the biodiversity? Second one is about resources, again, reducing the amount of water we use, removing the amount of waste that we produce, moving towards more circularity. And last but not least, it's also about people. How do we ensure that they get a better life by also looking at it from a safety perspective, diversity and inclusion. And recently we also introduced, for example, paternity leave with a longer time span as one of the key, let's say, elements to support also our employees. So having said that, now you have a bit of an idea about sustainability. How do we address it at Solvay? But let's move into how do we actually tackle this now in the context of digital and also in the context of customer experience. And we have a couple of topics that or a couple of steps that we are taking. So first of all, it's about measuring. So how do you actually measure your entire carbon footprint? And that's not a single game, right? So you have to really look at your entire chain of events from your suppliers, upstream, downstream. So it's quite a tough game in the first place to look at how do we get all the data together. Then secondly, that exchange needs to take place, and that's something where you need to, again, digital capabilities. And based on the insights that you're gaining, how do you actually build a roadmap and look at initiatives that actually help reducing the carbon footprints where you see them the most hurting. And last but not least, it's also taking the action and communicating that so that you also make a bigger impact on an educational level. So to just give you a bit of an idea around what the complexity is in terms of calculations, what you see here, we talk always in terms of measuring of 3 scopes. 1 and 2 is really your own, let's say, kitchen. And then the third is the more interesting one, which really has an impact on your entire environment, is to look at, okay, what's the upstream and downstream type of data that you can collect in order to actually make sure that you have an end-to-end picture. So that's one way to basically demonstrate the complexity of it and also demonstrate again that it's not an isolated game. So a couple of challenges that we need to overcome. You can imagine data is one of them. It's a really tough one to overcome. Second one is also how do we actually change or also influence behavior with our customers, but also making sure that we have a clear interaction with them on all the topics that matter. Also the balancing between sustainability and profitability is a tough one because you have to invest a lot in order to actually gain the momentum on sustainability. And then there is the regulatory issues and anyway the complexity of the chain supply as well, because if you work in a very multinational environment, you can imagine sources coming from everywhere, regulatory requirements in every different state are different. To also take into consideration. So there's a lot of complexity overall. But let's attack it from a customer experience perspective. So that's the next part of my presentation, where I want to take you a little bit through the thinking and the methodology that we're using at Solvay to actually bring the two together. So what you see in the first instance here is the iceberg principle. A lot of you know that principle. You see a lot, but you don't see everything. So if you look at, let's say, the different dimensions that you don't see as a customer is basically along those 3 lines or 4 lines of processes, data, technology, driven by strategy. So how do you actually make sure that everything underneath the iceberg works properly together so that the 15% visible actually gets all the attention and gets the improvements that is what we need to change. So having said that, it's also in my company a bit of a starting point to really work with archetypes of personas. So we're looking at personas in terms of the complexity of our customers in many, many dimensions, and especially in B2B. Some of you are working in the B2B area. You know, there's not just one buyer persona, but there are lots of different types of decision makers. And one of the learnings that we also had is there is not, let's say, the sustainability persona, but you need to look at what are your different buyer personas, what is their sensitivity to sustainability and the messaging around sustainability. So we attached this type of scoring to our personas to make sure that we are conscious of the fact that we also need to see how we can connect with them, with the needs and with the right message. And the next part, and that was the framework that we have started using since last year, is to have a very, let's say, generic but a good starting point of our 8 end-to-end journey stages, starting really from the need awareness, exploration, choice, reduction, negotiation, buying, ordering, using, all the way to your renewal phase, the different stages. To also really look at, okay, where are we actually abusing our customers and suppliers, and where do we actually are doing pretty okay, and where do we want to differentiate. And what you see here is basically the different paths of the different personas that I showed earlier that are not always in every stage present. And the second part, which is very much important as well, is if you look at from a visibility point of view, we are now moving undersea. That means we're looking at all the processes that are behind making those experiences possible towards our different personas. And I left out the data piece and I left out the system piece, but you can imagine it goes intricately more complex over time. But that's the first starting point that we did. Okay, let's map the journey of our normal experience. So how do we then take this forward towards the sustainability aspect? And that's where we started running a couple of workshops. We used our researchers, we did internal workshops, we did customer interviews, and we tried to use this type of mapping methodology in context with our sustainability initiatives and really looking at it from the, let's say, buyer journey cycle, from a customer life cycle, and see how to connect all the initiatives and where we need to have more initiatives into the framework. And I don't go into all the details, as you can imagine, but that's just the one way to work through with different organizations or different parts of your organizations to get the visibility, but also the thinking around, okay, how do we do more and how do we actually layer that? And what you see here is also data is absolutely the foundation for everything that we do. So now coming back to the digital aspect. So we talked about sustainability. We talked about how do we connect against the customer experience. And the third one is, okay, how do we use then digital in this context to accelerate? And what I wanted to show you here are, let's say, some of the channels and the utilization of digital to basically make this customer experience and customer experience in combination with sustainability comes to life through our digital channels. So I'll start here with, let's say, our marketing programs and the focus on personalization. And that also relates to how do we actually automate our communication to our customers, but also how do we use sales automation to inject and introduce the, let's say, the great content that we have coming from our marketing organizations around sustainable and innovative products that we have, and really build that into the messaging in our programs towards our audiences. Another way to bring the sustainability topic to the awareness of our audiences is to use it within our product catalog. And it's a very important channel. Obviously, there is a lot of focus, especially when our customers are trying to get into the understanding of what products do we have, that they also get technical data sheets, but they also get more information about the specifications with regards to sustainability. And we see that coming up more and more. It's something that we see growing a lot, and it will at some point be inevitable to sell any of our products to have sustainability data in there. So it's not, let's say, a can do, but it's a must do to bring this information in there. Then we're also focusing on portals, and that's customer portals where customer can just go in, log in, find the information that they would like to have. And we also have here the opportunities to request samples, and even those samples that are used then in the labs also need to contain the right information. Otherwise, maybe that research will actually stop right there because it's not fulfilling the needs of our clients. And it's also looking at it from a perspective of what can we recommend within those portals to our customers? What messages do we bring, and how do we actually bring, let's say, some of the portfolio that we have focusing on sustainability to the right audience at the right time? And you can obviously look at it also from your whole operational process. Let's say, how do you automate more in your operational processes with digital means? How do you also ensure that we have the right tracking, the right choices? Right now, customers cannot really choose different types of transportation when they order products, but we do envision that in the future, customer might want to choose a more sustainable way of getting their products delivered, and then can have the choice to select the right one. And then it's also looking at the front line with our customer service. How do we use our customer service more effectively? Also train them, make sure that they actually have a full understanding of what we are actually aiming for with our sustainability agenda, and how do they actually also get enabled to talk to the clients in the right way. So sales and customer both are a big advocate of our sustainability agenda. And last but not least, it's all about, again, as mentioned, data. So how do you ensure that everybody has a good visibility, but also how do we use reporting as a means to an end so that we can track everything, but also how do we ensure that we actually can collaborate with our suppliers and partners in the right way to have maybe new types of innovations coming out of this. So it's also used for co-creation, but it's also feeding pretty much everything from our marketing, sales and service processes and operations as well. So I wanted to give a couple of nice examples now in terms of the real life examples of the digital capabilities that I've mentioned. This is a very physical event, so not very digital, as you can see. So real life people, no avatars. So they're all sitting around the table. And it's something that we started off doing to actually educate our internal workforce with the climate fresk. So it's a method where you can learn basically in 3 hours the impact of climate change. But it was also something that we have translated into a e-learning proposition. And we also encourage our internal workforce to actually learn more about the topic through all kinds of different, let's say, academy type of offerings. And then obviously there is a big focus around how do we educate our market. And the education on the market happens primarily through our content marketing efforts, through webinar solutions, but also if you look at, let's say, the type of content that we publish on a regular basis, in blogs and different newsletters. So we have a very strong focus there on actually everything that we do connected to sustainability. And that's an example of our data collection, our product carbon footprint calculator. So we have, more than here it shows like something about 4,500 products, but it's up to like 10,000 products and going into incredible amount of detail to collect all the data. And it's something that we started doing. It's a big journey and is still a big journey ahead of us to actually collect all the data points. And also mentioned earlier, we have different scopes, 1, 2, 3. Number 3 is the most exciting one, especially for the ecosystem that we are operating in. And that's an example of our portal. So we have seen quite a lot of increased users of our portal, and that's also where we see in the future we will be growing more to try to get more and more people into the portal and then use that effectively with our communication to engage. And that's almost the end of my presentation. So I will leave you with a couple of key points, and I try to comprise like everything into 10 points. So I hope it's still good enough to take it away. But I try to make it easy for you. So I have an ABC model to give you some, let's say, easy ways to move into the checkpoint list. So number 1, so if you talk about CX and sustainability, it's super important to first of all have a clear understanding what is your sustainability goal, what are the initiatives. Make sure that you have that properly organized, and also make sure that you look at it for the entire value chain, because you need to look at it holistically. The second one, as also mentioned earlier, is like really understanding the customer values and really also understanding the preferences of your customer towards the subject of sustainability, because you want to connect the dots properly at the end with your ambitions to drive customer experience. And therefore, having a strong voice of the customer program is a very helpful tool in this context, measuring NPS or CSAT. I don't know what you're using in your organizations, but that's something that we do within Solvay. And it's also looking at it from the whole touch point and moments that matter perspective. So where are the moments that matter in your journey, and where can you inject sustainability initiatives in there to see how to create symbiosis on this. The next one is the build part. So the aim part is really, let's say, defining your what. The build part, we talk about really looking at roadmaps, the initiatives, how do you execute it, how do you use the right reporting tools, make sure that you have, let's say, a more complete picture over time. It's also looking at creating the educational resources. Education is one of the key starting points because you need to have that common alignment, and it also helps you to drive the message. And also looking at it from the digital capabilities as mentioned, what are the digital capabilities that you can use to do your broadcasting and promotion of your initiatives, but also how do you engage in a meaningful way on the subject. And last but not least, ABC, change. So change is the most important piece because you can build whatever you like. If it doesn't impact change, then something is not quite right, and you probably didn't really understand the value of your customers, or you didn't understand properly what are the mattering or the real touch points that you want to address. or you measured it on the wrong way or not in the right way. So there are a couple of things, again, to really drive change. It's not only the customer experience, but also your employee experience. And therefore, training your workforce is super essential in order to get, let's say, also internally the right alignment. It's secondly also understanding how do you monitor and report on the change that you're trying to evoke. And then last but not least, make sure that you continuously evaluate your objectives with the activities and see how you can continuously improve on that. So that's the 10 points, and that's also the end of my presentation. I'm open for questions if there are any. Thank you very much.